I really encourage exactly what was suggested. Virtual networking is still an amazing experience. You see people, in the members, the people attending, reach out to some of them. They're running through the same experience as you are. And all the speakers in that list that I know are like super friendly. So would welcome messages on LinkedIn and other places. So with that, I'll dive right in. This session is about AI. It's about Microsoft Copilot and what's changing for employee experience. We'll talk a lot about Microsoft Viva technology, but also the broader Microsoft Copilot strategy. So we'll talk about that as well. And I'm really excited to share some of these insights with you. Now, I know I talk pretty quickly and I get excited. So be sure to reference both the slides, which I put in the sidebar there, as well as in the video recording for future reference. And if you have questions, put them in the sidebar. I will absolutely be staying up a little bit later after this to answer those all the way from Canada. So again, thanks for having me. Let's dive right in. Again, if you haven't reached out to some of the speakers and other people, maybe I can be that one friend you can make very comfortably in this. Please reach out. I love questions and answer discussions. A lot of times what people ask is how I learn. And with AI, we're all learning this together. It's moving very rapidly, so it's really important to learn it. In this particular session, I wanted to talk about what we've been seeing. I'm lucky enough within my team to work with a number of different customers that are doing Copilot experiences in the preview programs, and I've worked with Microsoft research teams and other ones as well. So there's a lot of insight that I have, and my goal is to share as much of that as I can with you while kind of hinting at what's coming, where I'm not allowed to talk about some of these things as well. So today we'll talk about these four sections. The main one will be this working with AI tomorrow. We'll probably spend about 20 minutes on that one. It'll be the densest section. And with that, let's just dive right in. So the reality is AI is not arguably a new thing, but it is certainly new in the way that it's accelerating and the way that it's impacting organizations today. So in executive boardrooms, when I'm meeting with executives, it's the number one conversation that's happening. And the biggest thing to understand about it is it's not a linear change. And a lot of the technologies that we're familiar with that we love are relatively linear, right? It's like an iterative improvement over the last one. It's an incremental change, maybe a little bit of disruption, but generally it's not as impactful. Some examples of changes in the past that were impactful like this have been like the internet and its implementation, or mobile applications and mobile access and things like that. So this is a major change the way AI works, and it is an exponential one. This is important because it's basically too important to leave in the hands of technologists alone. So many people in the Viva community are coming both from the business side and the technology side. And so depending on where you're coming from yourself, I think it's really important you and your peers really see AI not as a technologist problem and a technologist, set of concerns and considerations, but one that the business needs to absolutely lead in. It's just way too important for it to be led by technologists alone. So the second big thing that I wanted to talk about is the frequency and the speed of this change. So we've had major changes before, right? Some great examples of that was the mobile revolution, what happened there with the removal of presence and access barriers, or with the internet and the removal of communication barriers. Get a bit of echo effect there. Hopefully people can mute that for me. And the spread of information management through, computers and PC and electronic typewriters before that. And each of these changes created new opportunities for work. They changed how we work. And most of the changes, if we go far left, we see those changes were generational. They took place over, decades, many decades, and then they slowly got quicker and quicker with the examples of the internet and mobile essentially happening within a decade or two. And so now the question is how fast is this AI sort of change within the business going to happen? And our expectations at this stage is that it's going to happen in years, not decades. And that's the big crux of the discussion today, why AI is feeling a little overwhelming for a lot of people and for a lot of organizations. Because it's moving so rapidly, we really do expect that in the next years, we'll see so much change in the way we work, because the skills that you use, whether they're technology skills, whether they're academic and skills that we spend a lot of time and energy learning, those skills are going to reduce and be devalued in some categories. And more importantly, they're going to be more accessible to more people. And I think that's a really positive change, but it means that we have to understand what that means for our businesses and the nature of even what how we make money within our businesses as well. The second big thing is that I think everyone feels a little bit of anxiety, and I think that's healthy with AI. And that, is it going to take my job? Is it going to affect those things? And while there's a lot of disruption, without a doubt, that AI is going to drive, the reality that is that most people have been framing this as, well, it's not AI that's going to take your job. It's that someone using AI or collaborating with AI is going to take your job because they're better and more efficient at using AI than you. And I think that that's relatively fair. I do think in the next few years, this is going to be a key consideration is, can you collaborate effectively with AI? It's going to be a core skill. But as an organization, it also is critical if you're in a competitive industry. Not every industry is, but if you're in a competitive industry, it's really critical that you are, as an organization, embracing AI to remain competitive as well. I think both of those are very true statements. Now, when we talk about embracing AI, that doesn't mean necessarily, it's an automation or replacement scenario. A lot of AI scenarios are collaborative. Most people are familiar with the story where machine intelligence beat the world's chess grandmaster, and it was an amazing moment and time. And what most people don't know is that for a long period after that, the best teams for chess was a combination of human and machine intelligence. It's when humans and machine intelligence or AI works together that we kind of get the best outcomes. And this is really further cemented by the way it works within real enterprises today. So again, we're very lucky in the work that we do. We see hundreds of organizations, and we see absolutely there are way more collaborative opportunities for AI within organizations than automation ones. Automations is going to replace humans. It's at least 10 to 1. We think historically, right now, we're looking at around 20 to 1 ratios. So it's much, much more robust after the evolution for ChatGPT and now Microsoft Copilot. So we're seeing massive opportunities for collaboration. And I will be clear, I think it's about a 5 to 8x ROI improvement if you focus on the collaboration AI scenarios versus those of automation. I'm not saying automation doesn't exist, but it's certainly not where the focus should be, especially when we talk about employee experience and employee effectiveness. And because this change is happening so rapidly, it can be a little daunting. So keep in mind that turning on and using and experimenting with AI now is a much healthier approach, because if you make mistakes, it's not as consequential. Once this becomes more integrated in society, as it becomes more integrated in organizations and competitive ecosystems, it will be more and more critical for us not to make a lot of mistakes. And so now is the time to experiment and learn within departments, within our individual use cases, and especially as organizations. So the key call out here is that you want to embrace it sooner. And we want to focus on collaborating with AI, not replacing AI. And I hope that resonates with you and what your perceptions of AI are today. All right, so let's dive into working with AI in the Microsoft ecosystem. And there are a few ways I want to frame this. The first one is I'm a huge fan of thinking of employee experience more holistically. If you don't like Jacob Morgan, that's fine. Just some model where it's not just technology, but the employee experience is both cultural and physical as well. And it's really important to understand those facets of employee experience. Right now, we're going to focus on technology or digital employee experience because it's the biggest one that's changing the most rapidly. It's the most accessible to change, and it's certainly the most relevant for AI scenarios. And I'm going to break that into 3 subcategories of communication, collaboration, and management experiences. And each of those experience layers are also changing. Management is a relatively new area, with digital employee management experiences greatly increasing after the pandemic. And so again, something to really consider is like how these interweave together. Now, you're going to learn throughout today, if you don't know all of Viva, that's okay. You're going to learn a lot about Microsoft Viva today. And all of these apps or these tiles are applicable when it comes to employee communication technology. If we think of employee communication experiences within an organization, all of these technologies have a huge series of capabilities that they bring to the market and new capabilities they bring. And all of them also have AI capabilities already built into them. And I could go through examples for each, but I'll just keep them really simple with just a few here. As an example, if you use Microsoft PowerPoint today, you can do things like put a series of bullet points for some dates, and it'll understand with design ideas, not only can I show this in a nice roadmap or styled timeline format, but I can also understand that these are times, that this contextually should be surfaced in this way. So the design ideas isn't just giving suggestions on how to lay out your PowerPoint. This capability, which has been out for many years, actually understands the nature of what this content is. So it's a great example of AI that's been there for quite a long time, but many of us don't use it because it's not as visible, not as accessible to us. We'll talk about how that's changing. Another great example of this is the Viva Connections newsfeed. The Viva Connections newsfeed is algorithmic. It's actually personalized. It's kind of based on recommended news for the user, based on Viva Engage signals, based on, which used to be Yammer, based on Microsoft SharePoint signals and more. And because it pulls those things together, while we can tune it with things like, okay, when this news post is viewed, no longer show it or show it for a specific period of time, because we can tune it, that's great, because now all of a sudden, we have a little bit of control. At the end of the day, it's still algorithmic. So a great example of that, and a similar capability, which is these digests that go out to you. It's kind of what you may have missed SharePoint emails, is both of them happen based on your user behavior. So a few months ago, I went to a project management online office site that we have within our organization. I haven't been to that site in years. Because I went to it, I started to see news articles, because we do like lessons learned from projects and things like that as pages and news articles. I started to see those show up. And it was actually really cool, because I didn't tell it that I was interested in that subject matter. I just went to a site, and that site happened to have news and information regularly. And so for that period of time, it was showing me that information because it was recent, right? My behavior has triggered a change in the algorithm of what it's recommending in terms of news I might have missed, in the same way that it would recommend, signals within a news feed, as an example. So those are examples of AI today, and both of those capabilities have been out for quite some time. Another example here is Viva Topics. And Viva Topics, from Project Cortex to Viva Topics, it's been out for a long time. We have many customers who've been on multi-year journeys with Viva Topics. And while it's amazing because it brings knowledge directly to you in the flow of your work, whether that's in email, whether that's in Teams and SharePoint or in Office applications, what's really impactful about it, and again, something that's been around for quite a long time, multiple years, is that it's actually been using AI to analyze your content and the signals and relationships of content to make suggestions around topics. So you'll see things like actual topics, like areas of interest where you have a lot of content, people, relationships that can be surfaced within a dynamic page. Think of it like content analytics for content curators. If you're a content steward or somebody who owns an intranet, amazing set of capabilities. And then you see in this bottom example, and I'm using old screenshots on purpose here, you see things like the suggested files and pages. Those are great examples too, because it's not just pulling the content from SharePoint, but what Microsoft has indexed. So if your Microsoft search is connected to, say, ServiceNow, KB articles and other content will also be surfaced and analyzed within that. So we have an amazing set of AI examples already, especially with topics, in that it's breaking down and improving both the consumption of this information as well as the contribution or the writing. As a great example, when you write an email and you reference a topic, it saves you time writing that email. So it saves time on contribution, and it also saves time, of course, on consumption, because later, I can just quickly look and go, I don't remember what is Project Atna, and then I can surface that and learn more about it. Again, really useful use cases and learning there. Now, those are just employee communication examples that have existed for a while. Let's talk about collaboration ones. And again, Microsoft Viva and other tools have had a big play here. In the collaboration space, AI has had a huge impact on compliance and security. You can't talk about modern cloud compliance and security without talking about a ton of AI. And this is only getting more robust now that we have Copilot for security. And I'm sure not that far away, we'll have something like, I'm not officially stating anything, a Copilot for compliance. And because those capabilities will make it even more robust, this is a really powerful story. But that's a long and complex digression if we dive into it. So instead, I wanted to talk about something simpler like Teams Premium. So Teams Premium is a capability where some people could look at the meeting transcripts and the recordings afterwards and quickly understand what were the action items that they might have missed or that might be relevant from this particular meeting. And so it's making suggestions. This has been in preview for quite a while now, where you could use this today. You don't need to wait for Copilot to get these kinds of experiences. You just use something called Microsoft Teams Premium. Now, the advantage of these capabilities is we're using AI in the flow of our work, and even for things like auto-generating of chapters and much more, but it's done in a way that naturally flows with the way we're working today. These scenarios aren't for everyone. It's not like I'm saying, Viva Topics should be licensed for every user, although that would be amazing. I'm not saying you should license Teams Premium for every user. What I am saying is that you have super collaborators, highly leveraged or over leveraged even, connected individuals that people go to. They're like linchpins, people that go, they say, hey, you're the person who has the answers to this. Those people are the ones who want to be more digitally fit, right? This shouldn't surprise anyone, right? The people who want to be more digitally fit, digitally excellent are those those people. If we can make them that way, we're going to get better ROI than spending time with any other user group within the organization. And so for sure, those people we've learned the hard way, getting them Viva topics, getting them using, tools like, SharePoint more effectively, getting them to use Teams more effectively, Teams Premium, getting them to use Viva Insights and others. Those are the people that are really going to get huge benefit, and we're going to get better bang for our buck. So again, really important to start thinking about those scenarios as well. So that's collaboration as it's been in AI. Again, this is all stuff that if it's new to you, that's okay, but it's been around for a while, and most people in organizations we work with have started to do some dabbling in it. Now let's talk about management, a relatively new category and area. And I think a great example of management with AI that's been around for a while are these Microsoft Viva emails you get. Because what they do is management starts with managing your own work. And so you can see examples here where you have meetings that come up and you have low acceptance. Should we reschedule that? Or I have documents related to a meeting that it's suggesting for me. These are capabilities where it's using algorithmic, again, AI modeling to make recommendations for you. It doesn't show you every possible document, doesn't show you every meeting shows low acceptance or reschedule options. It only shows it when it thinks it's an appropriate circumstance or time. Similarly, I have a meeting later with Henrietta, and it notices that in my email threads and other places that it has that context, it doesn't look like I responded to Henrietta related to this question. So because I haven't responded to that, it's making that suggestion that maybe this is something that's relevant for that meeting coming up that maybe I should have already looked at, or I need to add to my to-dos so that I can have a better follow-up after the meeting. And that works from Teams signals to email signals and more. So this is, again, not new. These capabilities have been around for a while in the Viva email experiences and Viva Insights. And so those give me a lot of capabilities. They're not limited also to that experience. They work within, the desktop client. They work within, obviously, the web client. We can quickly take actions on these things. It's more about how it's making those recommendations where AI is having a big impact. And even the Viva Insights app with things like unread document from Lynn Robbins being surfaced here, it's making that recommendation because I probably have a meeting with Lynn Robbins coming up, or it's a really popular document, or a variety of other signals are suggesting that that's relevant. So AI is actually all around us if you're using some of these Viva experiences today. So those are examples of how AI has been working for a while, but it's important to note many customers haven't really embraced Microsoft Viva. Not every organization has even learned how to use these tools, even if they do have pilot programs or even full deployments of these tools. And so we still have a lot of work to do, especially on digital adoption, or on digital fitness is the term I like to use nowadays. We need to improve those experiences. And keep in mind, not everyone has to be super digitally fit, right? Again, focus on those super users, those super collaborators. All right, so let's talk about working with AI tomorrow. This is the Copilot story, right? And communication is going to change with Copilot. Some great examples of how communication is going to change with Copilot is it's going to change how we accelerate and optimize communication. So as an example, today, we might think of really simple use cases like, oh, of course, I can write better content in email. I can write better content, in various tools. Many people on this call, I'm sure, have used ChatGPT or some form of it. And so you understand how it can help with generating content. But I think what people miss is how it can connect content, how it can create new opportunities for amplification or for new types of profiling and targeting. And that's really one of the biggest benefits that I see with it. So here's an example. You're going to draft a proposal, and it's going to be based on some meeting notes and a roadmap. And because this is really easy to do with Copilot, it allows us to get started faster and create the content that we want. The second thing that it actually allows us to do is further optimize the content. So historically, some of us, like I mentioned earlier with PowerPoint Designer, have skills in PowerPoint, and some of us have skills in Word. Maybe the 1,000+ commands, there's that many in Word that you can do, right? Things that you can do to format, to style it, to arrange it, to make it better. But most people don't have that knowledge. And so remember, one of the big things that AI does is it makes skills more accessible to more people and allows them to engage with those capabilities more. So what's happening here is it's not just that I'm able to quickly create this content based on some meeting notes and a product roadmap. It's not just that I can then take that further, refine the style and the formatting to match a proposal that I like, as well as then add images based on another PowerPoint presentation. It's that I can do all of this very naturally very accessibly through the flow of my work. And even if it's not quite what I want, I can still go back to the traditional model where I use the old school way of editing things and styling and formatting. But I cannot express this enough. Once you start to use these techniques, you'll find less and less you're actually using the ribbon, less and less are you actually tweaking and styling things. You're just going to keep using Copilot to save you a ton of time in processing. And this means that for people, as they make this transition, they'll actually be able to produce more and do more than they could before. Another great example of this is with SharePoint. So you could create a onboarding site, as an example, based on a PowerPoint presentation, an onboarding guide, as well as maybe an announcement or a personal welcome message from a CEO or an executive. And when you do this type of process, it doesn't just create, say, a site, but it creates a series of different pages for the site. It lays out the site based on different patterns and practices. It does all sorts of things for you in this flow for a natural flow of execution. This doesn't just work for sites, it works for pages, it works for editing and maintaining pages as well, which is really important. So just think about this for a moment. In my previous example, what I'm saying is people are very clever and we all want to make better documents, but we don't all have the amazing skills to understand how to use PowerPoint or Word or other tools well. Again, it gives us that. At the same time, many people don't have skills in SharePoint or web page design, but this gives them the capability to rapidly create pages based on existing content. We all know if you unlock, a sales handbook or other material and make it in a web page format, it really adds a lot of accessibility, makes it easier to reference and use, and it adds a lot of dynamism and capability to it. When you think of the editing experience of maintaining pages, this also really helps. Let's say you have a page and it's based on some other piece of content, that content gets updated, you could use Copilot to make updates to the page as well. So there's a lot of things here where it saves time on contribution, but also on consumption, which we'll come back to with summaries and other types of experiences. Really important to understand how impactful this is. Between the ability of access being easier and the prevalence of this, we should actually see more web pages being created, which means there's more knowledge being created in better formats, which means it's easier to consume and much more. Here's another way to look at this, and I love this image from Microsoft. So there's this idea of with AI, we start further ahead, and with AI, we're able to optimize and improve the quality of content faster. And we've seen this, there's so many different research studies, but our own experiences as well have shown us you're seeing like 40%, 50% to 80% improvement of productivity is pretty much guaranteed. It's really high on document scenarios and all sorts of other things like that. And then we see quality consistently very high as well. 20% to like 40% is what we're seeing right now in terms of quality improvement just by using these tools. And that's what I mean by saying you can't ignore it. All right. I know what you're thinking. Richard, speed up. We can cover more content. So let me cover a little bit more in a different way. When we think of communication, it's also important to understand how you could use this at scale. So you could, instead of just summarizing one article, like an engineering article that's very technical, and say, explain it like I'm five, that's what ELI 5 means. So you could simplify it for audiences and then make that audience specific. So the engineering audience doesn't see that simplified one. They see the normal summary, but this other group sees the explain it like I'm five one. You could also do things like summarize a series of different articles over a period of time or documents and kind of help people understand what's changed, what's new, or what's around a particular topic area. A great example of this, there's a GitHub example that allows you to quickly add OpenAI to summarize existing SharePoint pages. I think this is awesome. Their main focus is to show how it can do language translation, which I think is a great use case. But think about this. Generating new content, of course, you're going to use it, but existing content, you can actually optimize and add AI to it quite easily with some quick SPFX work as an example. Which we do quite a bit with customers today. Another example is the way it works with research. So because it uses something called a semantic index and a semantic search model, when you ask questions, it will not just understand your context, who you know, relationships and all that around the content, but it will provide those answers in a more actionable and usable way. And that's a really big difference between what we think of traditional search or traditional experiences. And I'm going to come back to this, but this actually reduces the number of times we need to collaborate with individuals for relatively redundant activities that if we had the digital skills or digital fitness, we could have probably gotten the answers ourselves with enough searching or exploration as an example. So this is a big benefit. The other big benefit to this is the way that it works with referencing. So when you have a recommendation or it makes some sort of analysis, it's also showing you where it's getting that content from. really relevant in this example where I'm saying what solutions were discussed in the meeting. I can see exactly where it's pulling that from a transcript, et cetera. So this ability to be able to trust but verify is critical. And again, something that's going to be a core skill as we look forward. We need to use it to quickly generate content or make sense of things, but then we need to verify, did it interpret things correctly, and then tune things as we go. I also love this example of tone awareness and messaging style. So, and this is actually something I started to use like pretty much on every other email, and then I started to shift to weekly. So it's not like you use these things all the time, but it changes how you work. I'm a robot when I write. I write messages very formally in email, and this has really helped me change my tone, especially internally, to be a bit more warm, a little bit more friendly, and it's actually started to change how I talk with family and other things like that. I've learned a lot actually through this process, and this is one of the benefits of AI is it can be that coach. It can be your AI, and it can help you through your own journeys and experiences, which is an important distinction. Or I could have changed that and said, okay, I want to make this in the tone of voice of this person that I work with, and you can do things like that, or this person I want to emulate, and it can suggest changes in how you write and explain things as well. Here's another example. I love Glint. We use it quite a bit with customers today, and sometimes you get hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of comments in response. And the way you use Glint is you go and you talk to like the business unit, the business lead, and you say like, hey, this is what we're seeing in the data, and here's our recommendations, right? Nudges, things you can change. It's a dialogue. And so when we have that dialogue, they'll ask questions, and it's really hard to give those answers historically, even with Glint and its amazing capabilities. But with Copilot, it's actually really easy to get those answers quickly, dynamically guide the conversation, get to better resolution, clearer action items, et cetera, in less time. And then again, we trust but verify. We'll check those answers later to make sure that they did make sense. We didn't rush it too much. So really, really powerful and making this more enabled for more people. And then, of course, this can be used in other ways for writing suggestions. I'll just leave you with this particular thought when we talk about communication. Imagine Viva Topics, if you're familiar with it. Imagine being able to talk to the content and the topics and the concepts within your organization. And that's really what we are starting to see with early stage Copilot topics discussions, is that you can actually start to get into these really interesting dialogues where you're starting to navigate the organization's information, but in a more natural form. And so I'm very excited about this. This is the only screenshot I can do, and I have to be careful about what I talk about here, but I think there's a lot more that we can do here, especially when we come to predicting and recommending things to people at the right time. Now that's communication, and those are just a few examples. There's many more of how it benefits from AI like Copilot. Keep in mind that it's included in all the Viva experiences for free. It's just built into the Viva experiences. And so that's a huge benefit, just like the Power Platform ones. If we look a step further on the collaboration side, it's also relevant to understand how this is changing collaboration. And so I think there's two really important things to take away here. The first one is I've always loved this, fake math of 1 + 1 = 3. The idea is if you take two people, right, because of their skills and their experience, and you get them to collaborate, they don't just create something that is, the equivalent of their two people's capability. They create something that's better, right? Because they, reinforce each other, they influence each other, they tweak things, they suggest things differently. You end up getting something that's a little bit better than either one of them could have produced if you just doubled them up, right? And so that's the benefit of collaboration, right? We get, the sum is greater than the whole of the parts. And so that's the idea of why we collaborate. But there's a cost with that, right? Because, you can have miscommunication, collaboration can be expensive. So one of the things that's great about using Copilot or these kinds of experiences, AI essentially with collaboration, is it can really save time, which means that in actual acts of collaboration, you see it actually save a lot of time with efficiencies. Here's an example where we're suggesting ideas, based on an activity that we're doing together. We can generate more ideas. We could tweak that prompt and generate more. And multiple people can be generating ideas, not just one person. Put them all together. And then when we're done the meeting, as an example, after we've had our normal whiteboard discussions, we can summarize it. We can make that a loop component for a more interactive discussion later. There's a whole lot of things that we can do with this particular experience. So what's happening with this scenario is it's not just that you are using AI or we are using AI, it's that each of us is using AI in that sequence. And this is actually how you learn. So when you're rolling out these products, AI scenarios, you want people to learn from one another. It's really critical. So, and share. So think about it like this. It's an exponential difference because each person uses AI in clever and different ways in the flow of collaboration. And so that actually means that instead of getting 1 + 1 = 3, each one gets the complete skills and capabilities that AI possesses and brings to them, as well as the ridiculous access to knowledge and speed and efficiency it gives. And each one of those uses it in different ways, building on each other, teaching each other, and the end result is exponentially better than like our 3 example before. The other big one to think about is earlier I said collaboration has a cost. Well, we know absolutely when you use AI, a lot of those simple, redundant collaboration scenarios are reduced by a drastic margin because the AI copilot can serve as your collaborator. It can actually meet a lot of your basic needs when you're looking for information, when you're trying to make sense of stuff, when you're trying to generate content, and so on and so forth. So again, that actually reduces the cost of collaboration, which is, it's not just like a productivity gain of say 50% or something on that work. You're now seeing if you do a cost benefit analysis, you're going to see a much more significant, arguably exponential number of value when you start to get rid of the miscommunication costs and everything else around it. So huge implications for collaboration when you use AI. One more example of it, because I think it's important to give you more examples. If you ask a question, the first thing you get in every forum, right, is, tell me more, right? I need more details. Give me the logs, do something. So we can have AI help with forming those questions. It's important to think about this scenario because when you think about when you go to send an email and it says, hey, I think you meant to add an attachment here. And you're like, duh, I got 10 times smarter after I click send. I'm sure we all do that. That's really helpful because it helps us in the moment. It helps us in the flow of that work. And so the more it gets in front of us, giving us nudges, just like it does today, like I'm messaging you guys and it's IST and I'm in EST. And so knowing that the time zones are different, it's like, hey, Richard, maybe you shouldn't send this message at 3 o'clock in the morning there. And so those types of things can be really, really helpful in the same way AI can be used, not just reactively when I go to use the Copilot, but in a proactive way. Of course, in recaps and collaboration and meetings, it's absolutely going to change the meeting landscape in huge ways. So of course, and after the meeting effect, like, hey, what happened? What discussions were going on? Sort of a Teams Premium Plus. But you also see things like you joined a meeting late, meeting could have started on time because you can recap the meeting for yourself. Remember that Copilot is your Copilot. So here I can ask this question. I can see what's been going on. I'm not interrupting anyone. Everyone's still having their conversations and I'm able to quickly get up to speed of what's been discussed and what's not. Incredibly valuable. We're already using it today. It's so powerful between Copilot for sales, if you're in a sales industry, or if you're doing things like using Copilot just for internal Teams meetings, really powerful capabilities. Keep in mind, it understands not just the skills of being able to quickly process huge transcripts and things like that, but it also understands what intent and meaning is there behind certain things. Remember, it has psychographic, it has psychology, it has sociological understandings for terms and language. So it can do things like interpret, hey, there might be some concerns here, or based on what I'm seeing in the responses, people aren't as engaged here, et cetera. Really powerful cues that might help you be a better presenter or facilitator or something else altogether, including making sure you don't miss questions that are unresolved. And again, connecting those questions to potential solutions and suggestions from other frameworks and resources within your organization. This idea of taking content, taking conversations and more, and connecting it is a really, really big value proposition for AI in collaboration. And I think this is a great visual for it, because what's happening here is I'm using Viva Engage, and it's suggesting a question to this user because this user knows about that thing, because in Viva Topics, they have expertise in it. And so what's happening here is we see Viva giving this recommendation, and then instead of just them writing out the answer, right, it's even saying, here's a suggested answer through Copilot. And this suggested answer can also give references and other experts and other people that should be informed of it, which really improves the speed of my response, but also the quality and the connectiveness of my responses. Keep in mind, things like Q&A are key assets in the organization that often lag behind. We haven't invested in them. And so tools like Copilot can really accelerate that journey for a lot of organizations who are interested in answers in Viva, right? And those new experiences. So again, just amazing opportunities there. Now, on collaboration, there's a lot more it can do, but those are some great examples. Let's talk then about management, because we've talked about communication scenarios and collaboration ones. We already talked about them as today. Let's talk about the future of management. Now, this is one where I have to be careful with how many I can talk about, because I don't think publicly Microsoft should disclose how it's going to work with Viva Insights, but there's some really exciting stuff coming. So let me just highlight for now the power of it for optimizing management. And I think the best visual example of this is using the chat. I know this isn't Viva, but using the Microsoft Copilot chat experience. Because what happens here is you can say something like, did anything happen yesterday around this customer? Did anything happen yesterday in this department? Did anything happen yesterday, related to this topic area? And when you ask that question, because that semantic model, it's going to then suggest, what it happened, giving you the quick summary. When we manage ourselves, very powerful to use tools like this. When we manage people and teams, we're managing them to try and produce results. And so being able to ask these questions means I don't have to go ask these people, did they update these documents, whatever. I could, if I knew and I had amazing digital fitness, I'd know SharePoint has activity feeds. I'd know there's ways to get all these answers for a variety of different places. But putting that together and making it more accessible is a huge win. So yes, Viva Insights is amazing. Yes, Viva Goals and others are great for management. But this particular experience, I think, is just very, very significant in the way that it's going to impact how we manage with each other, really reduce communication lag issues and a lot of communication costs around management and much more. So again, take this example, go look at the recording again. If you haven't seen it yourself, think about it, because it has really big implications for how we manage in a post-AI world. Now, the second one that I wanted to talk about is I love Viva Goals, and we do a lot of Viva Goals pilots. I'm not even going to pretend to try and understand how many. And when we do these Viva Goal pilots, there's two things that we basically help organizations do, right? The first one is we actually have to help them get their goals into Viva Goals. They often have them in Excel documents or in business plans and other things. This allows us to take those and bring them into Viva Goals rapidly with Copilot. And just that alone is an incredible advantage, because that is absolutely one of the challenges with Viva Goals rollouts and scaling rolling pilots. The second big thing that it really helps with is actually tuning them. If you've ever done OKR initiatives like Viva Goals, you understand that there's a lot of effort you need to do we call it design workshops, but essentially coaching and helping people tune, reducing the number of key results or augmenting them so they're key, focused ones, or just defining them more effectively. And so as you kind of teach people these skills, especially as you switch from fiscal to fiscal or quarter to quarter, there's a big learning moment there. Using Copilot in a supportive way there, or even in some cases replacing the need for us to do that support, is a huge advantage and win. So I absolutely think it makes tools that are already quite accessible and powerful, like Viva Goals, even more accessible. And the underlying frameworks of what is an OKR and all those methodologies, of course, are much more accessible through this as well. So huge opportunity space is something like Viva Goals. Now, another big one is the way it provides skills. As I mentioned earlier, that was using Viva Goals well. Maybe you don't have that skill, and now all of a sudden you can be a little bit more adept with it. But keep in mind, skills are what Viva Learning is all about. And so you could use it to help come up with a game plan of how you're going to improve or explore careers or industry topics or things like that you're interested in. And it could help you map to learning objects, learning opportunities, whether it's in LinkedIn Learning that you have connected or internal resources and more. So again, there's a lot of opportunity. I know they haven't disclosed a ton here, so I have to be careful, but there's a lot of opportunity of how it affects both the learning process as well as how it affects career development and progression. Huge opportunities there. Now, those are just two quick examples. There's a lot more to talk about. I talked about Glint earlier. So just keep in mind, AI has big ramifications on employee management experiences. Now, what we just did in a whirlwind tour is we talked about how AI works today with Viva, and we talked about how AI is going to work very soon with Viva. And so it's really important, as you look at these other sessions and you learn more about the experiences today, to always have that lens in your mind of what skills, right, the things you're learning today are useful for 3-4 years from now, and what skills are really a short-term thing for the next year or two. And I think that when you start to really think about some of these scenarios, you're going to see where it makes more sense to focus your attention and time to, and why it's so critical to kind of get some of these modernization efforts moving faster. We're going to see way more change in employee experience in the next few years than we've seen in the last 50 years. And I truly believe that this is going to really change, and I hope I've given some hints at how that might affect things. This can be overwhelming. So my takeaway for this for you is just start with your individual productivity. Start with using, Bing for business, right? And the Bing chat capabilities as an example, which are really easy to implement and free, highly secure and reliable today. Use that instead of a GPT if you could. Use those tools, and then as these other things light up, use them individually, then as a team, then as a department, and then as an organization. It's really hard to run like departmental initiatives around AI if you individually haven't started to learn and augment the way you work with AI. So again, getting started now, not later, is really important here. All right. Let's talk about considerations for tomorrow. Now, there's a lot we could talk about here around skills. I'm just going to highlight the Work Trend Index report is amazing for AI. I think it's one of the best pieces of work. It's simple. It's like 1 page, 2 pages to read. So there's new skills like trust but verify. We need to know when to use AI, when not to use AI. We need to know how to write prompts, which is a short-term thing. Next couple of years, we need to be really good at writing prompts. Later, they'll be built into these tools, so we probably won't need to worry about it. We need to worry about bias detection, handling, hallucinations, stuff like that. Today, a few years from now, I really think a lot of that, I'm not saying bias is not a problem, but I think a lot of those problems will have been worked out. So again, there's some things that are problematic today as skills and are very critical and valuable right now. And then there are some skills that will continue to stand the test of 5 to 10 years. One of the big things to understand that's different about, say, ChatGPT or a large language model externally and something like Microsoft 365 Copilot, especially how it works with Viva, is it uses this concept of grounding. And that's really important because what happens is when you write directly to like ChatGPT, what you're doing is you're choosing your prompts, you're tuning it, you're making it better. What's happening here is you write it, but then Microsoft provides a bunch of additional context to make the prompt more effective. And then it sends that over, sometimes multiple prompts, to get a series of results, and then rationalizes those back and grounds them based on responsible AI, a bunch of other things, and then brings that back to you in your experience. Remember, they understand their products, so when they bring it back to you, they can also trigger things like my example where they did a bunch of formatting, accessing potentially thousands of commands in Word or PowerPoint. So it's a combination of those things that is really driving the value here. It's not just ChatGPT, right, or Bing Chat, right, Bing for Business Chat. Those are more similar comparisons. This is a very different model, and it's important to understand that it's far more effective in driving productivity and improvement because of those changes in the way that it grounds it. Now, if that's too technical, let me give you a different way to think about this. As I mentioned, this can be overwhelming. Now, when you use something like Viva Engage today, or what used to be called Yammer, and you generate a post, which is a great idea, using AI for that, when you generate a post for that, there's a question of, is this authentic? Because the whole point of these tools, arguably, is that the employee social networks and the Viva Engage experiences, storylines, et cetera, is meant to connect people with one another within an organization, to connect around shared interests, to
Richard,
connect around
last
shared.
5 minutes
Yeah,
remaining.
yes, I
Yeah.
am more.
So,
Thank you. And to connect around those shared interests and objectives. So when you think of the way AI supports this motion, what ends up happening is it can feel like AI is writing the content because AI is helping us improve the content. It's helping us, connect the images and content. We already talked about this, right? It improves all these other things. Now that's the first piece of content. Now let's say I create a storyline and then you respond to that storyline, right? And you comment on it using AI. Is that slowly becoming AI talking to AI? Is it becoming like an AI echo chamber? And is that what we want? Is that reduction in authenticity, quote unquote, create like a negative consequence? Because so far I've talked about employee experience as a digital thing, a technological change, but remember, it's also a cultural environment and a physical environment. So what does this mean? And is this the right way to use it? And so I'm going to give you an analogy, and I love this one because it makes me feel more confident about this particular subject area. Let's say you have a card. We've all gotten those cards, right? And someone writes something really sweet in the card. And so what happens is like a friend writes this like, handwritten note within a card. And then you get a generic card from somebody else, right? Which one do you value more? Most of us say we value the one with the handwritten note from our friend because it's got, someone took the time to write something in it. Now, imagine instead, the second card that has nothing else in it is actually, in my case, from my father, who's not a great communicator. I want to be clear. And so I would be like, I call my mom because I'd be like, whoa, what's happening? This is weird. I got a really nice card. Did he pick it out? My mom's like, yeah, he picked it out. It's what he wanted. That's what he wanted to say. And so all of a sudden, this card that just has his name on it has, for me, more meaning and value than this other card from a wonderful friend who wrote a nice note. And the reason it has more meaning and value is because it's allowing someone, in this case, my father, to express intent, to have his intent perceived and received appropriately from the other party. And this is an important thing within the business context for two reasons. One, we have to assume positive intent. I'm sure you've all heard this, but it's really important in the business context to always assume positive intent. And that is, it should be the driving principle for everything in business. So if we're doing that, when I get that response in a Viva Engage post, let's say from a colleague, it helps. I love seeing it. But when I get it from a mentor, a leader, somebody else I aspire to be, or that means something, again, we're talking about relationship ties here, and they write it, even if AI wrote it, and even if I'm not sure if they wrote it, it doesn't change the fact that they still read my post. They still meant to share this really positive thing. And so the intent trumps here, and the intent is what we connect to and most meaningfully within the work context. So what I'm getting at is I don't think it's a valid scenario to say that it creates a reduction in authenticity. I do think there's risks here and you need to manage it like anything else. But I do think fundamentally it just means that more people who couldn't express their intent before now can more effectively not just express and communicate their intent, but have it received the way that they meant it. And that means bias and other issues also get removed in communication. And we're seeing that. The number of people who are contributing now in Viva Engage with Copilot or in other spaces is so much greater than was before. And it really is new voices and new connections that are happening. And that is exactly what we want for employee experience. That's like most of what employee engagement and employee experience is about. And so for me, that's really inspiring. And I think if nothing else, take away from this that AI is daunting. There's a lot to learn and understand. But at the end of the day, the one thing that remains consistent is that the intent around our communication, around our collaboration, and around our management is still the same. And the experiences might change, but it's just changing so that our intent is better realized and
Richard,
understood.
sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Thank you.
thanks so much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Richard. There are lots of key takeaway. We enjoyed our session. There are lots of how to use Copilot AI together in the PowerPoint, in the other stuff. You presented very well. Thanks a lot. So,
Awesome.
guys,
I'll watch for
okay.
questions on the sidebar, and next speaker, when you're ready, take over.